You're watching the Health Now Nutrition Podcast, advancing our holistic and nutrition industry one story at a time. Presenting your host, Michelle Menopause.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Health Now Nutrition channel, and we are here with the amazing Kristins Bio today, and we're going to talk about menopause. Super important subject. So first of all, I'm just going to let you know I am Michelle Menopause, and I am the author of the facilitator of Saved by Nutrition, and Kristins is one of our massive, awesome contributors. She's got such a fantastic story in the book. And so I'll just let you know a little bit about me. I'm a holistic nutrition consultant here in Calgary, Alberta. And I absolutely love working with women who are in the menopausal phase and giving them the exact whole foods that they need using the metabolic balance program. So that way they can actually release a lot of these symptoms and release weight if that's what they want to do as well too. So I love doing that. To get a hold of me, you can actually email me at Michelle, MICHELLE, at making-strides.ca. That's MAKING-STRIDES.ca. Kristins, why don't you give us a little bio about you?
Hello, as Michelle mentioned, I'm Kristins Bio. If you've watched this podcast before, you've probably seen my face. We've done this a few times now.
Love you having me on the podcast.
Oh, I love being here. I am also a holistic nutritionist. I live near Ottawa, Ontario, and I focus on hormone balance, but more specifically, adrenal, thyroid, and sex hormone balance in men and women. I was one of the contributing authors in Saved by Nutrition, as Michelle mentioned, and I've also done a few podcasts now on mental health as well. I'm a big advocate for mental wellness and combining that with nutrition. And when I was in university, my background before nutrition was actually psychology, and I wrote a thesis with the Human Sexuality Research Laboratory on menopausal women and their coping strategies and their success. So I did a big overview of that, and I didn't expect to use that in the way that we're using today. So that's awesome.
I'm so glad.
And you can reach me at kristintalkshormones@gmail.com, and Kristins spelled Kristin.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that we get to have a wonderful open conversation about this. So really, I think that it's just really important to start off, like, what is menopause? And when does a woman usually start entering this phenomenal phase?
So I'll give maybe a basic intro, and then you can correct me or add on in anything that you want to.
I'd love to add on.
Okay, but menopause refers to a gradual decrease in the hormones estrogen and progesterone, which are produced by the ovaries. And those hormones gradually decrease, although they may fluctuate quite a bit during that time. But ultimately, ovarian production of those hormones stops. And then a woman is no longer able to reproduce because she no longer ovulates, no longer gets her period. And we think of menopause as happening as a result of aging, but it can also happen surgically if both of the ovaries are removed. Typical age for menopause as a result of aging is around 52. And once the ovaries stop producing the sex hormones in women, the adrenal glands, which are our stress management glands, and something I talk about all the time, take over production of those hormones.
We're going to be talking a lot about the adrenals today because we both concur that that is your number one thing to support when it comes to menopause. It's absolutely phenomenal. So everyone should know that I have hit 50 as well this year. So there's been lots of talk. There's been a lot of experience that I personally have had when it comes to women hitting menopause. When I was part of the fertility groups, women were hitting menopause as early as in their mid-20s with ovarian failure is what they'd actually call it on a clinical basis for their fertility health. That just means that their hormones, the FSH, the LSH, were not producing. They were way to the point that they were the same as somebody who was in menopause. So that's what they considered that for these poor people. And of course, some of our studies, we've actually learned about different cultures. I know I'm throwing this at you too, that actually don't even experience it. They're still carrying babies into their 60s because of their massive reproductive health that they have. So I think that's the Hunsins more specifically with the maca root, which is one that I've learned from a few of the gurus that are out there. So super, super fun. Now, we talked about this before we got onto the podcast. There are different definitions of what menopause is. And I think actually we should mention them both because there are so many different ideas. So Kristen, tell us what your definition has been, and then I'll just share what mine is.
Yeah, so mine, and this comes from a psychology background. So I'll just mention that too, because I think different schools of thought will approach it differently.
Yeah.
But I was taught that perimenopause is the period, pun intended, not intended, the time period leading up to what we consider menopause. So perimenopause is before you've hit menopause, you're experiencing symptoms. Menopause is one single day, which marks an entire year where someone has not had their period. And this really confused me, but it means their period's done for good. I was like, what if it's gone for a year and then it comes back? But it means like it's done for good. That's it. It's the first year in which they're no longer able to reproduce. And then everything after that was considered postmenopausal. Yes. So that was my definition. It was a few years ago that I did this research, but back in 2016, that was it.
So, and the definition that of course I know and have also researched. So again, different schools of thought will give you different definitions. For those that experience more hormonal imbalances, periods go and stop and stop and go, perimenopause can last for years. People experience them when they're way younger, ovarian failure, but you're still getting a period as well. So to what I know as well is that the menopause is once you've actually had a cessation from your last period for one full year, then you are in menopause for 10 full years beyond that point, because you still have issues with your hormones going downwards. And there has been times when we've done some detoxification for some women who are in the perimenopausal or the menopausal phase that do receive their periods back again, because there is still enough of the hormone balancing that would actually happen. So super fun. So wherever you are, there can be different reasons why you may or may not think that you are in menopause. When you're talking to me though, yeah, you've got to be up past 10 years. That's just me. I'm going to say that. So what are some of the things that women experience during a perimenopause and menopause?
So I think the one that we talked about the most when I was doing my research, and the thing that was focused on the most was the hot flashes. They're called like the vasomotor symptoms, but hot flashes and night sweats were the sort of the big ones. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were considered like the cardinal symptoms. Like, yeah, and I think those ones get talked about a lot. But we also looked at symptoms like mood symptoms, so anxiety, depression, insomnia, vaginal dryness, low libido, things like that.
So is it true if you don't use it, you lose it? I had to throw that out there. You don't have to answer that.
I mean, my understanding has always been that the declining levels of estrogen are a major contributing factor in vaginal dryness, but I feel like you will have some more input than me from writing your book, so I might let you take that one.
I just had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
It is super important to continue on. There's a lot of women that do have a sexual awakening during this phase as well, and it's very, very wonderful. And then there's others that do experience massive vaginal dryness, and there are ways that you can combat that using food, believe it or not. Coconut oil is an excellent, perfect pH balance for the vagina. So if you want to actually experience that more, then coconut oil, just a little dab will do you. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do. Adding more oils into your diet as well can actually help bring about more wetness into the areas that you need them. So super, super fun, but I had to throw that out there.
Oh, that's actually fascinating, because I had a teacher, because I did some research with the Human Sexuality Laboratory. So I had a teacher who was a sex therapist who recommended coconut oil as lubricant as well. Just not if you're using latex condoms, because the oil will degrade it, but otherwise she recommended it as well.
Right. Yeah. And actually it's really important that you can still be using latex condoms while you're in the perimenopausal, menopausal field. There is those slight possibilities you can get pregnant. some people, it happens for some people, you know, it really does. So women, pay attention. So yeah, coconut oil is just, it's one of those really fantastic products out there, foods that you can actually use for so many different reasons. So yes, you can do a lot of that stuff using food. Other things I love that you talked about as well, like depression. That is such a big one that women go through for many reasons, you know, psychologically speaking. There's a lot of thought processes. It's like, oh, I'm no longer a woman, you know, and it's so fascinating because we talked about this just previously, and women have a very negative viewpoint of their femininity as we grow up in such a male-dominated world that, you know, anytime you get a period and we're at the office and you have cramps, you can't showcase that, you know, and you could be in massive pain, but you can't showcase that. And you can be angry, you can be PMSing, whatever it is. I had somebody tell me one time, my face used to get super swollen, and they told me I look like crap. And, you know, like, were you out drinking last night? No, you know, but how do you explain? No, I'm getting my period. You know, it's actually more masculine to be saying that you went out drinking the night before, you know, they'll accept that over I'm getting my period. Oh no, stay away from her. So we've gone through this whole thing that periods are terrible, you know, and hopefully you've had somebody that taught you that, oh, it is a wonderful time, bless your womb, do all that kind of stuff, but the majority of us have not. So then even when we hit menopause, it's like, oh my God, I'm not a woman any longer. And that is such a negative mindset when it comes to what our bodies are actually going through. So I really feel it's important to really start to reverse that and start to actually bless our bodies exactly as they are, where they are. You know, I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, and can I ask, Michelle, like how did you find that mindset shift happen for you? Like, can you weigh in a little bit on that? Because I know you went through a big mindset shift.
I did. I actually had a talk that I was doing called Female to Feminine, which is two completely different things. When I was going through my fertility journey, I was in my 40s and I was experiencing massive perimenopausal symptoms. So I had cystic acne. It was covered my face. I mean, can you believe it? This beautiful face, you know? I'm like, I don't want to scar my face, my beautiful face, you know? And so I had cystic acne, massive weight gain. I had night sweats where I was sleeping, and I had like a full inch of water in between my husband and I if we were spooning. And anyway, it was so super uncomfortable. Shocks, feet neuropathy, which the doctors say isn't part of it. But for me, it's like, there's a lot of massive cramping that I know a lot of women start to experience as well in their legs and their feet area. Maybe muscles get too tight. You know, we're always told start having more magnesium, especially when you get older, especially for your bone health, you need it anyways. So there's a lot of these things. Now, my mind 10 years ago, so I am 50, I'm going to say that again. When I was 40, I did suffer with severe depression. I've suffered with severe depression my whole entire life. One of the things that was super important for me was actually going through the education where we noticed that people have a choice when they hit 40, where they decide what kind of an old person they want to be. Do you want to be grumpy, or do you want to actually be one of those happy ones? And you know, I don't want to be around grumpy old people. I want to be like those happy ones are just like, oh my God, how did you get so happy? Aren't you adorable? I want to be adorable. So I knew I had issues. Thanks, babe.
That's awesome.
I want to be adorable when I'm old. So I knew I had massive depression, and I had to work steadily and very hard on bringing that depression into an area where I'm actually happy and I'm not just depressed anymore. So I did do a lot of research. Tryptophan was one of them that helped me. Now that one, don't just go ahead and take tryptophan because I say it. You do need a health professional to actually walk you through whether or not that's the right supplement for you. So just so that you know, it was the right one for me. And in the interim, as we're going to talk further, adrenals. That's the secondary aspect of the depression that I had because I was exhausted all the time. And so when I started working on the adrenals, it gave me more energy to help me with my willpower to start fighting the negative thought patterns. You can tell if you have an adrenal issue if you're addicted to coffee. Because if you're grumpy, how many people before they get their morning coffee don't talk to me until I get my morning coffee? That's an adrenal issue. because you need that caffeine kick to get your adrenals going so you can perk up and be happy for the rest of the day. And so that's a problem. So yeah, so I did that. I did a lot of work on issues that I also had growing up, things that I still held on to, working with my inner child work, and now especially working with the SRT, the subconscious release technique. I've still done massive work on those issues to release them from my subconscious. And the more I release all of that crap, the happier I feel, even now at 50 years old. Like, I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, and that's actually a positive direction. So super happy. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and I am so happy that I mean, all of that was it's so interesting. I love learning about your journey, but I especially love the last part that you mentioned, because I think it's really important. I was thinking about when I was looking at the research and some of the thought processes that people were going through. And I mean, I think it's important whenever you're dealing with a mental health situation to sit with those feelings and honor them and work through them. And, like, I think that's so important, not to just say, oh, well, I just want to approach this positively. If you've got stuff you need to work through, then it's really important to work through it so that you can reach that acceptance and like the finding the silver lining. It's okay if that doesn't come right away, if there's work to be done in the interim. I love that you talked about that.
Yeah, it's so funny too. Funny, but like super fascinating, because a lot of these emotions that we hold on to actually affect the adrenals and the kidneys, which also are in supporting of each other, and the thyroid. Do you have your voice? Have you spoken your truth before? Super, super fascinating. The kidneys are a site of fear. The liver, gallbladder is resentment and anger. The heart is blocking because of love issues. Like whatever it is for you, you may have these issues that need to really be worked on, and just pushing them down, that affects your liver, gallbladder, people. So don't do that. Acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm. No, I fully agree.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of different symptoms that women can actually have. And again, not everybody does. That's actually something we also mentioned. I personally noticed that women older than myself do not have as many perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. And I mean like 60s and up. So that people who are now approaching 50s, Generation X, Gen Xers, and then even younger. I've met even women in their mid-20s that have actually been considered that they are in menopause because of the lack of hormonal health. So let's just talk a little bit about that, about what's actually causing these issues that are happening for more and more of us now. Like
so the first one, the first one I'm going to mention, this is not a surprise, is the adrenals. So our adrenals are our stress management glands. They sit on top of our kidneys, and their job is to help us stay alive in stressful times, basically. So they produce adrenaline for those super like 30-second burst of energy if you need to like run from a tiger or something. But they also produce cortisol, which is our long-term stress hormone. And that would be for situations back in the day when we were injured or grieving, or I would think of dealing with something like a food shortage. All of those things would involve cortisol production. But if you fast forward to modern life, everyone is chronically stressed. And it's quite fascinating, but also very alarming to me, the culture that we've created around, I'm going to call it hustling. And I don't think that hustling is 1000% a bad thing, but I do think that we have really promoted productivity and success and constant accomplishments over like taking time to rest and recharge. And that is really hard on the adrenals, like constantly being on technology, constantly dealing with like emails and the phone ringing and people talking to you. And, you've got this list in your head of things you need to do. And you've also had 4 cups of coffee because you're exhausted and you're not sleeping because you're stressed. That all has to do with the adrenals.
Absolutely. That is such a big thing, is to really learn how to de-stress. I can't even emphasize that as much. Again, you and I both have learned, if you're going to support your fertility health and your menopausal health, it's adrenals. What'd you guys learn?
Yeah.
Adrenals.
We were joking about getting a megaphone and being like, it's the adrenals. Yeah, because as we mentioned, the adrenals take over production of the ovarian hormones after the ovaries stop producing them. So if the adrenals are worn down from chronic stress and a lack of support, it's going to be really hard for those adrenals to then take on an extra job, right?
Yeah.
Like here's your employee who's like burnt out and like falling asleep at their desk, and then we put another task in front of them. That's really hard.
What's really also super important about that is that to note that adrenals do not automatically replenish themselves. If you've burnt out your adrenals, you have to do something in order to get that adrenal health back. It's not like many of your other things where it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to start eating well now. And then, no, your adrenals, when they're done, they're done. There are specific things that you can do, eat, take, supplement with that can also help you to replenish it. And it's not just it's just not an overnight fix though. These things are so important. What kind of things would you recommend for the adrenals?
So it's a really good question. The first thing that I think of is blood sugar balance. And so, because when our blood sugar is out of whack, the adrenals take over and help us balance blood sugar. But actually, if you're somebody who gets symptoms of being hangry, it can be a sign that the adrenals are not doing so hot because they're having trouble helping you balance that blood sugar. So to super simplify, I think of blood sugar balance as having fat, fiber, and protein with your meals, as well as just being aware of the general sugar that we're taking in. You know, I don't think all sugar is bad, but it's very sneaky. And I think it can be quite eye-opening to see how many foods sugars actually, and drinks are a huge one that sugar has actually been added to. So that would be number one for the adrenals for me. Like number one is your blood sugar. Number two is much easier said than done, but I always think of rest. Like how much are we actually cultivating rest? Even if and I think like, it doesn't mean that, you know, you take like 4 months off of work and go on vacation and, you know, sleep for 10 hours a day.
Yes, it does.
I mean, if you can, that's amazing. If you can't, like, how do you take those like little moments in your day to cultivate rest? Or how do you make subtle shifts to your routine that allow you to like unplug and sleep and truly take a break and just like allow your body a chance to remind itself that it's safe, to be honest.
Oh my gosh, super important. Rest. I remember going through my own chronic fatigue when things were bad, like 10 years ago. And I was so burnt out that I could get out of bed and go eat breakfast and then I have to go sleep again. I was not functioning in life whatsoever. And yet like all my hormones would read that they were all fine and normal. I don't know why this is happening to you. And this is what we consider the chronic fatigue syndrome that we end up going into. And the only thing that actually, well, the only thing, myriad of things, but it was really rebalancing my adrenals. And that took years. That was not an instant fix. So a lot of women that are my age do go through that fatigue. And of course, with the blood sugar imbalances, that's also the weight gain that we always complain about as well. So super, super important. I personally love the ashwagandha, schizandra, rhodiola, those supplementation types of superfood runs. I did so many of that. Someone had given me this most amazing cappuccino with reishi mushroom using cashews as your base for milk. And then of course like cinnamon and a few other superfoods that were added in there and some oils. As well. So you have your protein and you have your superfoods and you have your fat base in there in order to help. And I'll tell you, sipping on those things was delicious. I was super happy to have that one to replenish my my adrenals. Super fun superfoods. So let's talk a little bit about the night hot flashes. I really want to share how to help hot flashes. I really want to share.
Sorry, you should share the title of your book if you haven't, because it's so perfect for this.
No Sweat for Glorious Holistic Menopause. It's such a simple read. It really is simply my journey. And from 10 years ago, when things were awful, to what I did nutritionally wise and spiritually wise, stress wise, brain wise, in order to move myself out of that. And the success was within 6 months. there was a marked difference on, like, so we were doing the fertility, but again, super perimenopausal. And we could tell because the first set of embryos were very poor and poorer, and the second set were high end and higher, like at 42 years old. So that was the marked difference that I knew this made a difference. One of the first things we did was, believe it or not, was a juice cleanse. And I really want to warn people about juice cleanses. My nose is running a tad bit, but the juice cleanses are super fun. If you get angry when you start a juice cleanse, start eating again. Don't, because what happens is that your liver is detoxifying. And I lasted about a day and a half, and then I had a complete and total meltdown. I couldn't do it. And so I was so grateful to read, start eating again. Start slowly, don't overdo your digestive juices, but you can start eating again if it's not working for you. And so I did. And then a couple months later, we did it again, and I could last 3 days on a juice cleanse. And so I was good. And we actually did manage to make it up to 10 days to have an actual juice cleanse. And I can tell you the success in doing that and getting rid of my night sweats, which were like this much water at that time, was magnificent. There was no more night sweats. In fact, I experienced them about 2 months ago for about 3 weeks. And then we started juicing again, and we're still eating, but we're actually only eating like 1 or 2 meals per day versus like all day long, which was good anyways. We kind of needed that. And just having the right juices going into my body, they've disappeared again. So no night sweats, no insomnia, none of that right now. I'm so super happy.
And I feel like this is a perfect example too of when it can be really good to work with a nutritionist, because there are like juice cleanses, like what you are doing, and then there are juice cleanses which are not going to do anything. And I mean, unless there is a therapeutic reason, which is exactly what you did, we don't want to just stop eating and right, like there needs to be a basis. So I think you illustrated a perfect example of working with a practitioner, number one, and two, tailoring it to your own needs. Like I think it's so good for you to mention that, hey, you know what, the first time it wasn't right yet, and things were, it's important no matter what you're doing to tune into that.
Absolutely. Good way. Good segue there. Because yes, absolutely. Again, this is Kristen. Tell us again who you are and how to get a hold of you.
Hi, I am Kristen Lefer. I am a holistic nutritionist with a focus on hormone balance, specifically adrenal, thyroid, and sex hormone balance. I do like to work with both men and women, and I'm also a very big advocate for mental wellness and for creating positive relationships with food. And because it's relevant to this podcast, I wrote a thesis when I was in university studying psychology on coping strategies for menopausal women. So it's very cool how things come full circle, and we ended up talking about this today.
That's awesome. And I love it because you're Kristen at KristinTalksHormones.com, .ca. .com. Perfect. Awesome. And again, I'm Michelle Post. I am your host with the HNNI, or it's not Heine, but Health Now Nutrition podcast. And I love working with women as well in their perimenopausal and menopausal phases with the Great Metabolic Balance program to help them release their hot flashes and any excess weight that they have as well. It is super fun for me when I see someone, they're like, no, I run too hot. I run way too hot. I've been hot for decades. You can't help me on that one. It's like, just wait. And then the next time we see each other, they're wearing a toque in the middle of summer because they're actually cold. It's like, your hormones are still balancing, but you're not running hot any longer. I love it. So you can also get a hold of me at Michelle at making-strides.ca. That's MICHELLE at making, MAKING-strides, STRIDES.com. People have a hard time knowing that one. So that's super fun. So when should people start to think about their menopausal health?
So I think that this is pretty cool because we are at very different phases in our lives, and I think it's worth mentioning. At least I'll talk about where I'm at, and then I'll let you talk about your own journey and where you were at. So I'm in my 20s, and so people may think, well, you don't need to worry about menopause, and don't worry about it because that stresses the adrenals. That is the opposite of what we want to do. But I think it is worth mentioning that the way that I live now in the decades preceding menopause is actually going to impact how it goes, especially because I have this history of adrenal issues. So, I'm starting my career. In the next 10 years, I might be having kids and raising kids. And so there could be a lot of stressors and a lot of things that may be hard on the adrenals and hard on the thyroid. And if I don't make it a priority to take care of myself, I could roll into my 40s with, 2 decades of burnout under my belt and adrenals and a thyroid that have been, we'll say like under functioning, hypofunctioning for years. And that is going to could impact how menopause goes, but also when it happens. Like you were mentioning, fertility clinic, I could hit it early.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And with the history of the adrenals, that can actually cause issues with the ability to even procreate, to actually have children. Now, you'll find a lot of people won't say that. A lot of the people in the medical field, my experience with being, I was the facilitator here in Calgary for the support group for IAC at the time. Now it's Family Matters Governmental. The amount of women in their 20s who were going through it was astonishing, who were considered, they were in menopause in their 20s. Super, super sadness. So really, we're looking after your menopausal health is actually looking after your fertility health, because it's all one and the same. You want to make sure that all these exact same organs and body systems are working in your favor. So definitely want to do that. So yeah, 20s, love it.
But in case we made you super stressed and sad, I feel like, Michelle, you should let them know how it went for you, because it's not like all hope is lost if you don't start, at 25 or whatever.
Right? Exactly. So I love that, because it was a matter of 6 months where things were changed from my extreme perimenopausal symptoms in my early 40s and increased my reproductive health. And even now at 50, I was starting to experience things again. And I'm like, geez, I wrote this book. I better, go live it if I'm having these symptoms again, with good favor, in my head. So again, just adding the juice back into your life, super, super important. Just start there. And again, if you're feeling stressed, just, it's okay to back off and know that you're going to do it again in phases. And it can actually be a very, very quick success. I find people who do the programs with me, it's usually within those first 2 weeks that they actually have a magnificent shift in how their body reacts with all these symptoms. Again, it's everybody's body is different. You will react differently. It's still, it's worth it, because God, how many people have we gone through 10 years and they're like, it's the worst thing I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. There are women my age who've actually stopped their period, their sensation, like 5 years ago, that say, Michelle, can you help me get my period back, because I'm miserable in menopause. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely miserable. And it's like, well, I can't make you get it back, but I can help you detoxify so that way you're not experiencing this. So super, super important. So yes, you can really, really just take action now and get that going for yourself and really start to move yourself forward. Adrenals, liver, thyroid, and the right supplementation for whatever your needs are with a holistic practitioner. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great. I love your thesis though. Can you share just a little bit more about your thesis, because you have some good points here, and I'd love to share that more with people.
Yeah. So for my thesis, basically what I did is the data was already collected. So if you've ever done research before, that's awesome, but the data was already collected. And it was the piece that I looked at. It was an overview of women's coping strategies. So anything they tried to help their symptoms. And then it was their satisfaction with them. So, okay, what did you try? What was the best thing? And it's really fascinating looking back as a nutritionist rather than a psychology student, because things make a little bit more sense now.
It's a different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, because I had thought that there would be a clear divide in what people tried. I figured there would be people who would go with traditional medicine and people who would go with alternative medicine. There were more categories, but that was sort of the thing that I focused on. And it wasn't like that at all. People were all over the map with what they tried. They were pulling from so many different disciplines. And it's interesting because when I did the thesis, I thought of, a chiropractor and hormone replacement therapy and therapy as things that are just totally different. And now the way that we look at things, I'm like, oh, well, I mean, those are all part of integrative medicine.
Yeah.
That's really just a multifaceted approach. And it was quite interesting because I even wrote in my thesis, and this is before I'd studied any nutrition, that, hey, you know, there was no one coping strategy that people came away with and said, hey, this is the best thing. And there was no one category where people were saying, yeah, this has been the most successful. I mean, there were some that were higher up for sure. Massage therapy and was quite high. And so was HRT, which makes sense. But acupuncture was high for certain groups.
Yeah.
Like there was really no, there was no consensus. Yeah, but it was interesting, you know, ultimately writing it because I even said, you know, I don't think that we can make generalizations like this. I don't think that we can say, hey, this one thing works with this group. I think we need to look at these strategies that are used together, right? Because when they're studied in the lab, it's just one at a time, but that's not women's real life experiences. And I think we need to look at this maybe on a case by case basis. So it's quite interesting that there were like these little nuggets of a holistic approach actually hiding in my thesis even before I'd studied it.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So how did women fare when it came to their like cessation of their symptoms?
So there wasn't, this was kind of interesting. There wasn't like one definitive, you know, coping strategy that was higher than others. Everything was very like somewhat or fairly helpful, generally speaking. But I think it really speaks to that. One, well, I mean, how can you define whether something is super helpful when you're using it in conjunction with 6 other things, for one thing, right? So I think that that's part of it. But I think also too is that I was taking averages of everybody's experience. But I think it's worth mentioning that, well, one person could have rated this as super unhelpful, but 4 people found it really helpful. So, you know, what conclusion am I drawing here?
Right. So yeah, it really is, each person's individual body is different and unique and requires different approaches.
Yeah. And I loved reading people's individual takeaways. That was actually one of like the most fascinating pieces of it is the little nuggets that you would get from certain people.
Yeah, absolutely. And people's stories are so fun though, because you've even shared here about one person's coping strategy for stress was divorce. Yeah, that was super helpful.
Yeah, because we had our categories, but then we had sort of this open-ended section. Hey, what did we not mention? And one person said, I got divorced. You know, how helpful? She was like 5 out of 5, very helpful. But I mean, and I'm not advocating for, you know, that, and we talked about this before. Yeah. It's not like,
was it before or have we already done this, right?
But I think it's quite interesting. And she wasn't the only person to see menopause as a transition and to take it as this moment to reflect and say, hey, I'm entering a new stage of my life. How do I want this to go? And I think that's beautiful, right? And I think your story, I'd love to hear more about that for you, because I think that ties into yours as well, right? Like seeing this as this new stage in your journey and making changes if you need to.
Absolutely. And I think that that's actually, I grew up with not embracing my femininity. My father was a hockey player way back when. So he didn't last in hockey. He had an accident and lost an eye. So he didn't actually get to play hockey. But that's what, you know, you remember that show, you know, there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in our house. And I was very girly. And so when I was crying and stuff, of course, I was poo-pooed upon and tried to take the tough exterior, which did not help me in my femininity journey, even though I was a constant baller. It's like I'm not allowed to cry because those were really, really nasty thoughts in my head, even though I was still crying more consistently because I wasn't allowed to cry. So it made things worse. So as I started to get older, like the whole fertility journey was super fun because one of the medications they put you on made women cry. It was such an emotional one. And I figured, you know what? This is my opportunity to embrace my femininity of crying and feeling, because I had lost a lot of the ability to feel. I went right from you're crossing my line, you're crossing my line, you're crossing my line to, yeah, son of a, I'm gonna beat you up kind of thing. That was my life's journey with trying to learn not to cry. And so I had erased all these wonderful emotions. And then, so when this specific drug, once you go off of it, it just like makes you go into turmoil. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to be okay with crying. And so I did, and I would cry over the silliest of things, and I would call my dear husband up. I'm like, I'm crying over this now. Whoa. You know, it was so fun. And so now going through that exercise and really learning to embrace my emotions, I'm in love with every single emotion that I feel, the positives and the negatives. I'm in love with the fact that I feel everything, and I'm getting more out of enjoyment out of my life from opening up to that.
Mm-hmm.
In the same instance, because I felt I had lost so much of my femininity with the weight gain, and, you know, again, women who are mothers, I may not have children, but I certainly understand the idea that my body is no longer my own. When I'm going through the fertility journey, you know, anytime they say we need to take an x-ray or an ultrasound, my pants would come off. Right. So even at the dentist, I'm taking my pants off when they said x-ray, and they're like, no, Michelle, it's your teeth. It's your teeth. And I'm like, oh, right. I get to do that again. I get to make my body my own. So I did take up belly dancing because I was not in love with my body. And I knew for the weight gain and for me to feel who I really was, it was really important that I was able to move my body in female and feminine ways that nobody could dictate to me whether I was doing it right or not, whether I was being masculine enough or not, whether I had to go to the gym and pump iron when that just wasn't for me. It might be for other people, but it just wasn't for me. So I did that for about 7 years, and absolutely it's one of my favorite things to do. And I can't wait to actually go back. I've got a few things on the build right now, so my time is not there at this moment. But nobody can take that away from me. If I want to perform for no reason, I can perform for no reason. If I'm not feeling feminine enough and I want to move my body in certain ways, I can. And I can feel that way for the rest of my life. I can be 90 years old and I can still move my body in those ways that make me feel ultra feminine. So I highly recommend to really embrace your femininity, whatever that looks like for you. If that even means working out at the gym and pumping iron because you want to be warrior feminine, you know, whatever that looks like for you, I highly recommend women embrace their femininity.
I think that's so beautiful too, because as you were explaining that, I think it's quite interesting that there is a lot of aspects of being a woman where you don't have control over your body. We don't have control over our periods, right? Although I know that some people who don't understand how periods work think that you can hold it. You can't. You have no control.
No way.
No, you have no control. I'm just going to put that out there right now. You cannot hold it. It's coming whether you want it to or not. But, you know, with periods, and then, you know, if someone is pregnant, is breastfeeding, there's I remember reading, and I was so powerful. It stuck with me. Someone talking about how she had a baby and she'd been breastfeeding for a while, and someone asked her about the next one. And she was like, well, I need time for my body to be my own before I even think about that, because my body has spent so long belonging to someone else. And then with menopause, again, your body is going through like so many changes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're talking about your fertility journey, it makes me think about how much of that is still out of our control often. Yep. You know, like whether or not that's going to happen, and how hard that would be. So I think it's an incredible point that you're making about, that this surrender and finding this acceptance, however that looks like for you when you're ready. I think that's quite beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Because I really feel that a lot of women give up after they have their babies, their children, and they no longer go to finding that place of femininity or their own self-identity. I've seen a lot of martyrdom in mothers. And I'm really sorry. Absolutely, take care of your child. Absolutely, be the best parent you can. At the same time, you are still a person. You're not a non-entity, and you're not a non-person. And that's not up to anyone else to recognize that. It's up to you to feel it and to showcase that. So I feel that that's super, super important, that women really embrace themselves as their womanhood, whatever percentages. We all have our masculine, female side. So whatever percentage that means for you as well, because we're all different. But make sure that you know that you're an important person regardless of where you stand. You are super important. Your children would be nowhere if you weren't there. So you have to really, really build yourself up that you are the most amazing person, because you are. And, you know, if you're starting that today, then start it today. You know?
And I love that you said that too, because we only touched briefly on it, but the thyroid gland, which is in the neck, is important for menopause. Yeah, like it's important for metabolism, super important in fertility.
Yeah.
You were talking about how it governs our levels of female hormones, and it also takes over for the adrenals if we're having a really rough time. So they're very like intertwined. But the emotional component behind the thyroid, one, I love that you mentioned this because it's your voice box.
Yeah.
But the other thing with the thyroid is, when is it going to be my turn?
When is it going to be my turn?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not just for menopause, but I think that's such an important thing that you were touching on, right? Is this idea of when is it going to be my turn? You know, when do I put me first and make sure that my needs are being met?
Yeah. And absolutely, because the hierarchy, when it comes to your family, no matter what, your family cannot function without you in it. I can't stress that enough, you know? So you have to take care of yourself first. When you're going through the airplane ride, do not put the oxygen mask on your children before you actually take care of yourself first. You will pass out, then nobody gets the oxygen mask. You have to take care of yourself first. You are the person in your own driver's seat. You're the only person that's looking out of your eyes in your perspective. Nobody else is doing that for you. So you have to put yourself first so you can be the most amazing person to everyone else. You know, it's not a couch 22. It really is the reality. And I just can't stress that enough when it comes to women, how important you are in the people's lives you affect. You know, I just cannot stress it. And you do not have to be a martyr. You do not have to give up your personhood for that. So if you have, take up belly dancing. You can get it back. It happens. It works.
I love that though. I love that perspective. And I know that yeah, it comes from your own story, which is so beautiful. Like this idea of taking back your personhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever that looks like for you. Oh, it'd be so fun to find out when everyone's like, whether it's like, I took my personhood back by doing this or doing that. I have a friend who's in stage 4 inflammatory breast cancer. And there is no going back. So it's just a really sad thing, but she's decided to take back her personhood, and she decided to do a, not Miss Universe, but like on the hierarchy to get to that place. So she started massively bodybuilding, you know, and holy cow, she just looks fantastic. She's doing everything in her power to know who she is and what she's actually capable before the rest of the day, before the date, you know. So like, again, inspiration. So why would I wait for me to have a sentence? You know, why would I do that?
Wow.
Why can't I take it back now? You know, you never know when that sentence is going to come. So just do it. So I mean, that might have been a little sad, but you know, I'm inspired by her.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. Okay. I've stumped Kristen now. She's like, oh my God, I didn't know that story was coming up. So
no, but I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Right. Like just absolutely. I'm surrounded by amazing women, absolutely amazing women that I've met over the last few years as the director for Calgary South Women Talk, and coming out and just all their stories and where they've come from. And believe it or not, we all have a connection. So again, for women who have locked themselves in, there are numerous opportunities to meet other women and learn that connection in order to find out what works for you. If you don't know, find other women who've traveled the path, you know. Super amazing women. So super blessed. I feel super blessed in my life.
And did you find that as well with your book? Like when you had feedback from it, like did you know, how was that experience for you? Like having people look at your story and then talk to you about it.
That's interesting. So yeah, I've had a lot of people really love the book. It's a very simple book, so I just let them know it's the conversation. It's not one of those in-depth professional, you're going to find all these papers that you have to research type of book. It really is just my journey, what I went through and how I combated it using nutrition and mindset. And taking those changes, that nutrition, mindset, getting rid of the stress. So when people have read it, they're just like, wow, it is super simple. It really doesn't have to be difficult to regain your health. And I think that a lot of people make it difficult. Do you remember, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've had people say to me, I don't want to do holistic nutrition because it's too complicated. Oh my God, it is actually about simplifying. you know, what we feed ourselves at Thanksgiving has about 20 different dishes on it. Do you think that that's not complicated to put 20 different dishes on the plate there? You know, you have to eat everything. Your digestion is now complicated. Going a holistic nutrition, you know, you pick your fat, you pick your protein, you pick a couple vegetables. You're making it simple. You know, like less ingredients, less crap that's actually out there that imbalances your hormones, which we didn't touch yet. We should. We're just going forever.
We didn't too much. I know, we just want to talk.
This is great.
But I think that's such a good point. Like my personal opinion is that holistic nutrition is complicated. It is our job to make it not complicated for you. And if you're working with a good nutritionist, it won't feel complicated.
No,
it should feel very simple and straightforward.
The only difference is the lifestyle change. So the first couple of weeks, it's complicated because you're not eating the same complicated foods, and that's confusing. Until you actually get used to the fact that, oh my God, my meals are simple, they're easier, they're quicker. I'm not spending extra money on all the takeouts or all the groceries that are going bad in the refrigerator. It's super simple. I get to eat these amazing foods, and they're delicious because my taste buds now love them. You know, and then getting rid of the foods that actually cause hormone issues, hormone disruptors that are out there. Those are all your refined foods. You know, all those, the chips, and yes, God, guys, most of us love our chips, especially with adrenal fatigue. Chips is a thing, right? Like chips is a thing. So it really is getting rid of all of the bad things that are actually out there. Those Twinkie bars, you know, like sorry, Twinkies, but no. You know, all those refined foods out there. If you can't pronounce it, don't take it. Plain and simple. You know, if it's got more than 5 ingredients, no, it's just a big no. You know, so super, super important. We had, when I was going through the fertility journey in order to regain my hormones, one of the issues is that our community sprayed glyphosate. And glyphosate, because they were doing that, they actually had to send out the WMIS sheet to everybody so that they could read what actually the repercussions are of having those types of chemicals in our air. And one of them was reproductive health. You know, it could actually severely impact reproductive health. So when they sprayed, I couldn't go outside for 3 days. In the summertime, when it was hot, I could not open my windows. I couldn't do anything. I could not go outside because I could not be around it because I was working on my fertility health. And, you know, just the very fact that they would actually spray that around out there for people and not care. Like, you know, farmers who use that wear hazmat suits, but in our community, it's okay. No, it is not okay. So I had to stay inside. Thank God they don't do that anymore. But, you know, it's just super important that even your environment may have a lot of disruptors out there that may cause more hormonal impacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know you talked about the liver as well, and liver detoxing. And I think just to touch briefly on that, our liver does a whole bunch of jobs. I think it's 500 and something, but I keep hearing different numbers. They're super busy.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And our liver is responsible for detoxing all of those chemicals and pesticides, including the hormone disruptors that we come in contact with. But it's also our liver's job to break down hormones when we are done with them, especially estrogen, right? Yes. And so if our liver is busy dealing with the glyphosates that are sprayed, and we'll say a bunch of food additives, and, you know, let's say there's like other pesticides around and other household chemicals, environmental chemicals, once we add everything up on the list, it may not have time to get to estrogen, or it may be very sluggish with estrogen. And that's where we can end up with a lot of hormonal imbalance issues.
Right? Estrogen's up here when they actually should be going down this way together. They're actually going down like this instead. And then that's where you get your symptoms. That's where that happens. So it's really good to make sure. I love that. Do the liver. So first of all, adrenals, then liver. Super important. So to make sure that you are working with your favorite holistic nutritional practitioner, holistic nutritionist, there's various of us out there that are actually trained to help guide you through this, and we absolutely would love to be a part of your life. So again, I am Michelle from making-strides.ca. You can find me at Michelle at making-strides.ca. And this is Kristen from
And I'm from KristinTalksHormones.com, and you can find me at KristinTalksHormones@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Oh my God, what a fun conversation we've had today. I love it. I love that we keep educating each other too. So
I learned so much from you today.
me too.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that we can share these stories and our experiences and really just learn more about how to actually make our health, even improve our health even more. I just love it. So again, make sure you guys are contacting your favorite holistic nutritional practitioners, and we will see you guys again next time on the Health Now Nutrition channel. Bye, everyone.
You've been watching the Health Now Nutrition podcast with Michelle Post. For more information on how you can be part of the holistic and nutrition movement, visit www.healthnow.today to book your meeting.